It's another cold, rainy and windy day today, but we are back on our path and we are going to go on this hike. I forgot to bring my rain gear or a hat, so let's see how it goes. Let's talk about the energy apparatus of the body. You know, if you have read Walt Whitman, I think it's in the Song of Myself, he says, how is it that I derive strength from the beef I eat? It's a deep question. That's just one question. He's talking about himself. It's a song of myself after all, and he's discovering, he's exploring, he's expressing who he is. He is exploring the oneness, he's feeling, expressing the oneness that he feels. And that is the answer to the question that he is raising. How do I derive strength from the beef that I eat? Or it could be from the wheat or corn or vegetables, whatever it is. How do we derive strength from what we eat? What is the energy apparatus of the body? How does that connect us to the rest of the world, to the rest of the universe? There are different explorations of this. I mean, if you look at what the Buddha did, he went on a quest, and for a long period he ate minimally. He ate minimally, like a grain of rice a day or something like that. That is the legend. And if you go to some of the Southeast Asian shrines, the Buddhist shrines that still survive, you will see lots of statues of Buddha, and amongst them, some of them are from that period of his life. He is shown completely emaciated. The skin is just hanging on his bones, and all the ribs, all the bones are out there protruding and visible. And he went through that to understand if that is the secret to his quest. Now his quest was different. His quest was essentially a release, an escape from the cycle of causality, from the snares of desire. And ultimately he found that the stopping of food, the starvation, is not the path. He found the other path, the Eightfold Path. But this thing about food is a fundamental quest. Now if you look at the time spent eating and what kind of food is eaten, that has changed over the millennia, over the course of evolution. In fact, that is one of the main drivers of evolution. What food is eaten by which creatures. So let's talk about that today. As you can see, it's pretty rainy and wet. If you look at some of the ruminants, some of the animals that graze, could be cows, buffaloes, deer, sheep, elephants, they spend a lot of time on food, on foraging, to some extent not quite searching, I guess, but within the pastures they still search for the best food in the patches where there is new succulent grass or leaves and more nutrition. So there's time spent in searching for that, and then there's time spent actually eating, and then time spent ruminating, and then digesting and so on. And so essentially a lot of time is spent just on the ingestion and digestion of food. It could be fair to say that maybe 8 hours a day, if not more. Maybe elephants is even more, but a lot of time is spent in all these activities around food. Some other creatures, like say the blue whale, it has to eat I don't know, a few hundreds of thousands of pounds of those little krill each day. So just chasing them down and finding them and eating them, there's a lot of time spent doing that. But then some of these creatures, the whales and so on, they eat for a few months, and then for the rest of the months they don't eat at all. They migrate all the way from the Arctic to the tropical areas for calving and birthing and rearing their young calves, and then back again to the north or wherever they are from to feed again. Similarly, bears, they eat a lot. Like the amount of salmon that the bears eat in the summertime is just simply amazing, and at some point they eat so much that they don't even eat the flesh, they just eat the roe and the brains and the fatty parts because they want to build up their fat reserves. But then they hibernate for several months, and during the hibernation, of course, their activity is almost zero. If you look at the carnivorous animals, they probably spend a lot less time hunting and eating. Look at the lions, tigers, probably wolves. Every few days they need to make a kill and eat, but then the rest of the time they are not completely engrossed in the food cycle. But then there's the scarcity, the unknown, the sort of feast and famine cycle that they go through. Primates, depends on which ones they are, but they also spend a lot of time foraging and eating. And humans in the hunter-gatherer stage probably spend a few hours a day, every one of them, in foraging and eating, and much less probably in storage, until of course agriculture. That's when we could start producing food in a predictable manner in large quantities, and we could scale up the food ecosystem, the energy ecosystem for humans and for society. Even within the ruminants, if you look at cows versus sheep, the cows have a fairly stiff and immobile lip and jaw structure compared to, let's say, the sheep, and hence the kinds of vegetation that they can graze, can capture, is different. They are, less able to discriminate good grass and bad grass if they're all clumped together, or younger, more succulent leaves versus mature or dried leaves if they are clumped together. So they are less discriminating by not having the apparatus to discriminate, and hence the quality of nutrition that they take in is worse than what, let's say, sheep can take in. Sheep can be more selective and hence take in more nutritious content and sustain themselves in a better way. But of course they are also smaller, so they need less of it and they can afford to be more selective. So there's this whole trade-off between how big you get as an animal, how selective you can be, and how nimble is your apparatus, meaning how much has evolution spent in building the nimbleness, the flexibility in the apparatus of eating. And you could be a specialist like koala bears, they eat only eucalyptus leaves, or you could be more of a generalist. You can eat whatever comes along. And then there's the foraging strategy. If you have a favorite food and then a less favorite food, or more nutritious food and less nutritious food, then do you wait for the more nutritious food to be found, or do you satisfy yourself on the less nutritious food that you might have just found? And what if there are more than one kinds of such foods? So there's a whole foraging strategy. It has to do with predator-prey populations, densities, and availability of different kinds of food. Of course, in the human case, we have cut through a part of that through agriculture. We can grow at scale what we need as a society and as individuals. That has gained the predictability and scale, but it has also lost us a few things. It has made us a lot more specialized in terms of the knowledge and in terms of the vocations and things that we do. Also has made us a little bit weaker and smaller compared to the hunter-gatherer societies. So how much time do we spend on food? There are different ways of looking at this. Depends on the development cycle of society as well. In India, a few decades ago, I would say that about 90% of the population was basically occupied in agriculture. So, 90% of human energy was being spent in food, essentially. On the other hand, in the US, about 3% of the population is engaged in agriculture. So that speaks to the mechanization and scale and industrialization of agriculture and the supply of energy for human consumption. But it's not just 3%, right? Because then you have to add the factories and food processing units that convert that into packaged food and then into the retail distribution centers where consumers can get it. And then when the consumers get it, they have to take it home, store it, they have to cook, plan meals, recipes, and finally eat it. So I think the 3% can easily go to 15-20% of time, proportion of time spent on food. And this is just the mechanics of food, just getting it to us and to eat it. Not even to eat it, just to get it to us. Another way to look at it is to see what portion of the average income is spent on food purchases. And I'm not even talking about going out to eat every day at restaurants or having cooks, chefs come and cook for you or something fancy. Just basic average, amount of time spent working, and how much of your wages on average are spent on food. So I think the average is probably around 25%. So that's about 2 hours out of the 8 working hours a day you are spending for getting money for food. Then in addition to that, you have to actually get the food to the house. Maybe you do groceries once a week for a family of 4 and spend 2 hours. So that's a bit of time there. Say half hour getting the groceries, storing them, and so on every day. And then every day, let's say for a family of 4 on average, let's say about 2 or 3 hours are spent in food preparation and doing the dishes and all that kind of stuff. And let's say we spend per person a couple hours eating, the food. So all told, 2 hours of work plus I would say another 3-4 hours of the other stuff. So let's say 5 hours or so on the whole per day is spent on food per person. So 5 hours out of 24 is about 20% of our time in effect is spent on food, or about a third of our waking time. 5 hours out of, let's say, 16 hours of waking time a day is spent on food. That is a high cost, 20%, 25-30% of our time spent in food. You may say that, well, more rich people, they spend less time because they can recover their food expenses much more quickly, and they can outsource, they can get others to do a lot of the food preparation and so forth. So maybe you can spend just, let's say, an hour or an hour and a half on food, and that's what you can cut it down to. But then you run the risk of creating a two-tier society. I don't know if it's a risk, but it's a possibility, that there are people who can satisfy their food needs with just a few minutes per day, and others who have to spend hours per day. And over time, that could diverge into a difference or differentiation. And then if that difference becomes very stark, do you really want to rely on someone very different for the food that you consume every day? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, I don't know, but that's a possibility. I mean, in a sense, you can think of us already relying on other species for food. In a sense, even if the most benign, maybe it is wheat or rice or corn, we grow it and we rely on that species for our energy needs. But then it's a symbiotic relationship. That species, the corn, in the US, for example, relies on the human to till the ground and plant the corn and grow it and foster it. And almost to an extent that corn has domesticated us as much as we have domesticated corn. And not only that, corn has colonized us. A large part of our body is constituted of the material from corn or wheat or rice or those things, either directly or through other species that they feed. So that's an interesting thought in itself. The cultural aspect of food, relying on others. Now the others could be as different as another species, or it could be as different as a subpopulation, which over time there's the possibility of it splitting off, or it could be as different as other members of the same group, like in a family or something like that. There's a huge, what I would call, cultural aspect that goes with the food. So the mechanical or the physical energy aspect is what we discussed so far, and the amount of time spent and so forth. But there's also a huge cultural aspect that goes with food. Oh, and here we are at the rock. Let me show you. There's a rock already. Well, at least I'm going to try to climb up to the middle section and see how wet it is. Alright, there we are, and here's the cathedral of tall trees that we are so familiar with. Well, it was a lot more slippery today, but that's okay. The whole cultural aspect of food is very interesting in itself, because in effect, you can scale up the food production and the mechanization of agriculture and all that kind of stuff, but in the end, each individual has to eat for himself or herself. And in the end, it is this highly localized, highly distributed action of obtaining energy for that individual. And that is the insertion point of culture. What I mean by that is that a person, sits down to eat or stands up to eat. That person is eating by for themselves, and at that point all kinds of things come in. There's taste, what kind of food is preferred by this person under the current circumstances. Maybe it changes from time to time, but there's conditioning of that person by the culture to prefer certain foods, and the body knows also certain things that it might need, so it craves or it asks for instinctively certain kinds of food. So that's the instinct part, but the culture part is what supplies those cravings, because it might come in different forms. It might come as a burrito, it might come as a tandoori chicken, it might come as a steak. haggis, whatever form it takes, the culture produces that form. And the culture is not just something amorphous, but it is what the person who prepared the food would like the eater of the food to experience. And then the culture goes back to the preparer of the food. How is that person accultured to prepare the food that he or she is preparing? And then that goes back to the tradition of the family, tradition of the region, of the tribe, of the scientific progress, whatever you want to call it. And it's all bound up in that. So the question is, can we unravel all these tentacles around food and get it down to the basic energy mechanics, and unentangle it from all the cultural and emotional aspects that go with it? And by doing that, is there an evolutionary advantage? The advantage essentially springs from the time that you would save. This 20 to 30-35% of the time that we currently spend on food could be spent on something else, potentially giving us space to explore other aspects of our existence, and hence to grow into them through evolution. There's also the concern of food is a fundamental problem, shall we say, and if you disengage from that, are you less grounded in a very existential aspect of life, and would you not then get unmoored from the solving of that problem? And those who solve that problem might be the people who take the steps in evolution. But if you see where culture, etc., has taken food, it has become a lot more of an entertainment than a necessity. You can see all the variety of flavors and tastes and presentations, and they are all very enticing, no doubt. But in what way is it different from the singing of a song, or painting of a painting, or carving of a sculpture? So how much of it is art and how much of it is energy? And can the art and energy be separated and explored independently? And then we come to the slightly micro level concerns. Okay, we can speed up, let's say we can speed up the time spent. Instead of spending 5 hours a day, we spend, let's say, 1.5 hours a day, 3 meals, half hour each, that's it. Or we do intermittent fasting and we just spend 1 hour a day, or 1 hour every other day. Does that make a qualitative difference between, say, 1 hour and 2 or 3 hours? And also, is the difference physical or also psychological? Meaning, we don't have to worry that, where will the next meal come from? And not just from a scarcity or poverty point of view, but just even from the labor of putting that food on the table. So suppose both the psychological worry aspect and the time spent aspect is reduced, eliminated, and we spend, let's say, just 1 hour a day on food. Is that just a habit and cultural change, or is that a step in the evolutionary change? I think for it to become evolutionary, we will have to find out how this energy apparatus can change even at the micro level. We eat all these foods with nourishment and nutrients in the large and small scale, like spices and minerals and so forth. Can we change how the cells absorb and store this energy? Can we change how they exchange this energy for various life processes? If the efficiency of the food can go down all the way to the energy apparatus of the cells, of the life processes of those cells, I think that's where the evolutionary change starts to kick in, as opposed to just a cultural change. So at the macro level, gaining back time potentially frees up to look at and tackle other bigger problems. It could be the path to changing of our neuron density and other neural structures, and at the micro level, it is the path to the energy infrastructure of the cells evolving into a more efficient and a different life processes. That's where this whole energy apparatus of the human I think needs to evolve to. Another place where this whole macro level agriculture revolution or evolution aligns with the broader program is on the habitat preservation. If we are to get more efficient with the production of food and large scale mechanization, etc., of agriculture, can we do it in a manner that preserves more habitat for wild nature, for other genetic experiments to flourish, to continue to evolve more rapidly, to create more pockets of opportunities of chance for different strains of lines of development to happen and to take root. So I think the energy apparatus that we're talking about connects up all the way to the overall energy infrastructure and the habitat ecosystem of the earth, all the way down to the time available for each individual to explore other things into which to evolve, and down to the cellular level for changing the life processes at the energy apparatus of the cell, and potentially even down to the material level if there are new ions or new compounds or new water structures or liquids, fluids, etc., that could be used in these cell bodies. It's a pretty ambitious and wide-ranging program with many aspects, and is definitely worth focusing on. You can see that some more trees have fallen in this forest. It's been pretty stormy and rainy late in this winter, but we had a beautiful hike nevertheless, even though it was a little bit wet and rainy and cold. So I'm going to stop with that, and we will continue next time with another aspect of this whole program.